Pranam, Jai Jinendra. So in this series on Pratikraman Sutras, we're now going to talk about the Saat Laakh Sutra. But in summary, it's classifying all 8.4 million species of life. All these 8.4 million species of life, we ask for forgiveness for any way we may have harmed any of them. Saat Laakh Prithvikai, Saat Laakh Apkai, Saat Laakh Teukai, Saat Laakh Vaukai, 10 लाख प्रत्येक वनस्पतिकाय, 14 लाख साधारण वनस्पतिकाय, 2 लाख बेइंद्रिय, 2 लाख तेइंद्रिय, 2 लाख चौरिंद्रिय, 4 लाख देवता, 4 लाख नारकी, 4 लाख तिर्यंच पंचेंद्रिय, 14 लाख मनुष्य. एवं कार्य 84 लाख जीव योनि माही मारे जीवे जे कोई जीव हण्यो होय, हनाव्यो होय, हणता प्रत्ये अनुमोध्यु होय, ते सभी मन वचन काया करी तस्मिच्छामि दुक्कडम. If we take just the first four today, Saat Laakh Prithvikai, Saat Laakh Apkai, Saat Laakh Teukai, and Saat Laakh Vaukai, you'll notice at the end of the sutra for all of these, it says Hanyo hoy, if I've harmed, Hanavyo hoy, if I've caused others to harm, Hanta Pratya Anumodhyo hoy, I've praised those that I've harmed. So you can see how much in depth this sutra goes. If I've done any of those, man, mind, vachan, speech, kaya, action, for any of those, micham yudam, I ask for forgiveness. Now, if we look at the lives that Panch Mahabharatari sadhu and sadhvis live, you will see that all of these, even these elements, Earth's natural resources, they absolutely minimize the usage, the harm, and the wastage. And the one for us easy to understand is from the environmental point of view of minimizing usage of natural resources. There's another angle as well, which is the harm or the hinsa or the violence point of view. So if we start with Prithvikai, and we'll do some stories as well, and you'll see them on the side on this slide. So Earth. So we take gold, mercury, lead, chalk. Many of these. Mercury you can talk about in mercury thermometers. Gold we can talk about in gold mines, silver mines. Soil, different types of soil. All of these come within the classification of Prithvikai or Earth. And one of the classifications of life is growth. And if you go to any gold mine, any silver mine, any of these mines, you'll know that once all of these things are mined out, and you have the actual gold, like you have a ring, this is or an emerald or different things, different stones, you have that. It doesn't grow once it's out of the earth. But while it's there, it grows and it grows. And it's not saying when we say these sutras and do these things that we're not going to use any of these at all. But it's respecting the fact that sadhus and sadhus don't possess or use or absolutely minimize the usage of these. Sometimes because of our vanity, for other reasons, we do use all of these, but it's still saying that if I still ask for forgiveness, I hope to one day have the strength to minimize this usage. I'm still knowing it's bad, I'm asking for forgiveness, and however, wherever I can, be aware of this and minimize it in my day-to-day life, I would like to do so, and minimize the violence I can cause. So growth is a function of life, and once these are removed from the mine, they die, they stop growing. And it's being aware. So you may still have some of these, but sometimes you may walk, and you can walk on a certain path and you can walk on another way where there's less we're aware, there's less mati, there's less caste, there's less things we can cause less violence. On the side you'll see a picture. That's a picture of a Mahamuni or a Sadhu Maharaj. You can see the heights of these compassion, where it can lead to. That he was walking on a path and there was a line in front of him, but he saw that if he on either side there was more life on either side, and if he went there he would cause more harm. He had so much bravery that he'd rather face the lion than cause more harm to innocent creatures that can't stand up for themselves or do anything, the one-sensed life. Apkai, water. Now in day-to-day life we can waste water. We might use 3 buckets of water for a shower when 1 bucket's okay. We might use 20 buckets when 1 bucket's okay. So you can see in their lives they absolutely minimize. When I went to India and I saw their day-to-day lives, we talk about global warming, global footprint, and minimizing the harm on the environment. Their life is a huge, of the sadhus, our sadhus and sadhus, a huge example of this. And this is where some of the respect comes from. It's not just knowledge, but it's also the action and knowledge combined and paired that we're really bowing down to when we show this respect to Namo Loye, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Odzayanam, Namo Loye Sabasahunam from the Nokar Mantra. Those 3 lines are all about praying, respecting our monks and our nuns. And a big part of that is respecting this life they lead, which we know we can't. We have these different things, but one day we want to reach a stage where we don't. And in the Pratikraman, we still ask for forgiveness for our usage of these things. And it gives us the awareness to always minimize our harm to the natural resources of the earth and life within that as well. Upkai. The Mpeba effect, if we look into science here, is one way of proving life in water. And in the modern day, we can talk about Captain Scoresby, which any biology student will tell you about through the experiments. He proved there's more than 36,000 lives within water. And you can see science is slowly catching up. It wasn't more than maybe 100, 200 years ago that science denied life in plants. Now science all accept life. Plants have aspects, features of life. Our scriptures have given so much detail. If you go deeply into the Jeevichar, science of life, Jain biology, it will show you and it will prove to you how all of these things are. And you can understand science through understanding Jainism a bit more. So there's so much treasures and depths within our ancient scriptures. Upgai, so the Mpeba effect we're talking about. If you go into Ayurveda or the science of biology, you will notice Pitta is a fire body, a fire within us, and Teukai or Tejas, Ojas, Tejas and Prana are the essence of different aspects. So Tejas is a fire body within each of us. Similarly, we have a karmic sharir or a karmic body, and then you have our physical body we can all see. Now, this fiery body within us helps us digest our food. So if you study Ayurveda or the ancient Indian tradition of medicine, not just within Jainism, but also within the Vedas, within Indian traditions, they mention this. It will talk about how our food is digested because of these digestive fires within us. The main one being Jatara Agni within the stomach region, but 40 different digestive fires. So Tejas, and this fire within us provides radiance. And how do you know this fire within us is there? In a dead body, you look at it, it becomes cold. This warmth we have, body temperature, this radiance that you can see in different people, that when they're alive, particularly when they're full of vitality, full of strength, is the Tejas, or the strength or the radiance within, because of the fiery body. That helps us digest our food as well. And it's said that every life has this Tejas or this Tejas body, fiery body within. And water, your Bayan many will say, Ukkairul pani piye. Now have boiled water. Why? Because it's a lot less painful to for the water to die first, and then you have it, than for it to be drunk alive, effectively. And also many other jeeves within that water, it's less painful. So it's not saying that we can end life, end violence to life, but try to minimize it in each and every aspect of life as much as we can. Now the Mpeba effect says that if you have 2 glasses of water, one is cold and one is boiled, and then it's left to cool. Eventually that one that's left to cool after being boiled will become even colder. In cold countries that are full of ice, when people people are told this, if you get hot water and you pour it on ice, it might help in the short term, but eventually that will seize up, and that water will actually become even colder and stronger ice, because that fiery body, that Tejas Sharira, according to Jain science, is gone. So if it eventually becomes even colder, because that water is effectively dead then. And that is one way of proving about life in water, taking an extension of that. But you can read a lot more about that in detail within our ancient Jeevichar and science, and you can correlate it with modern science. You can see how one day science is likely to come to that conclusion too. Teokai, fire. So usage of electricity, lights, to minimize harm to fire body. So fire, Teokai, is not just that fire that we see. And again, a feature of life in fire, that you feed it wood, you feed it things, it grows. So growth is a feature of life, like we mentioned it in the other. Eating, it eats the fuel that you give it. And Teokai, you might not know that the Queen in Buckingham Palace turns off all the lights as she goes around in the evening. And that's something to learn from the Queen. So again, another thing Jainism teaches us is to learn the best from everyone and to see the worst in yourself, to always try to improve. Not just Jainism, all spiritualities will talk about that. So Teokai. And we ask for forgiveness that for any excessive usage we have. And if we look at the lives of our sadhus and sadhus, they don't use mobile phones, they don't use electricity, they don't use PowerPoint, they don't use computers, they minimize the harm of these natural resources. And similarly, when we do Pratikraman, when we do Samayik, we don't use any of this. The lights are closed, because in that Samayik, we're living the life as a sadhu and a sadhu. And in that Saat Laakh Sutra, within that very Pratikraman, in the rest of our days, in the rest of our lives, where we've caused excessive harm, we're asking for forgiveness by mind, speech, action, which we've done. There's a story which we can talk about with regards to Teokai. Gajasukumal was a great sadhu, and his sasra, his father-in-law, once had enmity with him when he was meditating and put a bagri with burning fire coals on his head, and that heightened. And we won't go into the reason there was the enmity, because that will take long. One day we can maybe talk about that as well. But the essence of the story here is the thoughts Gajasukumal had at that time meditating in the fire. He didn't have enmity towards his sasra. He didn't have feeling sorry for himself. He was so brave, so strong. He actually thought that, these poor lives within this Teokai, this fire, because of me, they are being generated and dying. There's so much harm there. I wait for the state. I can go to Siddhalok and minimize cause no harm to any of these lives. And he got so deep into his thoughts, it had Gevagnan, or absolute knowledge. You can see a picture of this story on the side here, and you can read it in more detail by searching for it, or ask me, and I can share some resources on that. But that's the story of Gajasukumal, and it shows the height of compassion and something to emulate, heroes from our own tradition. So Saat Laakh Teokai. Now the final aspect of the Saat Laakh Sutra we'll talk about today is Vaukai, or wind. And that's not just wind that blows on you, but fans, AC, all of this to minimize the harm or unnecessary usage. And even if we use it, we're aware that this is causing harm, and I want to one day minimize my global footprint on the earth and on the environment, and cause less violence. So we look at our spirituality, and in terms of the modern movements of minimalism, environmentalism, it's probably the greatest scientific treasure, and something to be really grateful and really study and go in deep. And it can take a whole lifetime and you still won't get to the bottom of it. Our sadhus and sadhus do dedicate their lifetime to this study, which includes Jainism, includes Ayurveda, includes aspects you can go deep into aspects of astrology. But our text, our spirituality, has gone deep into each and every subject, and it's something to explore in more detail, and that will increase the faith as well. Because you'll see different things. You can correlate it with other spiritualities, other faiths. Oh yes, this is the same here, this is the same there, and it actually gives you more respect for all other faiths as well, and compassion, karuna, if everything is read in a sense of vinay, vivek, and anekanta, or seeing multiple angles and arriving to that same truth at the core of everything. There's a story. Char Mahamuni. There were 4 great munis, and they had a vow, had a pact, that they would meditate for 7/8 of the day, Sat Prahar, and only in one part of the day would they go and do everything they needed to get their Gochu. And this had happened when they'd gone away from their Upashara near a village, and they'd got to different parts, coming back to that village at that time where they had to stop to meditate. And it was a terrible biting wind. You can see the picture on the side here. And they all stopped in meditation. It was extremely cold, so cold that you could die from that cold. And they stopped, but they didn't feel sorry for their bodies and all of that there. They thought that this life in the wind, this Vaukai, it's being harmed in this and being colliding against my body, and dying and becoming, and I wait for the day that I can go to Sid, to Moksha, and I don't need to harm any life at all, and no life is harmed because of me. And in this deep meditation, thinking this and feeling bad about all the harm they've caused, or Pratikraman or Prayasthit, they were in this meditation, and in that meditation, because of the biting cold at different parts of the night. So then the first part, the one who was furthest away in the rural area, he passed away. The second one was a bit closer to the outskirts of the town, passed away in the second part of the night. The third was a bit closer in the third part, and the fourth, the final one, was closest to the warm village, but still really cold in the fourth part. But they died in such pure thought, they all went to Devlok, or heaven in the next life, from the Chargati. And I'm sure on that path towards lessening karma, towards ultimately the aim would be liberation or moksha. But this story just shows the extent of that compassion and that karuna and the good karma and the greatness of these lives of our sadhus and our sattvis and our tirthankars. Arihant. Arihant means Ari's enemy. Hunt is to destroy. Those who have destroyed the inner enemies are the tirthankars, Mahavir Bhagwan, Paryushan Bhagwan, Rishabdev Bhagwan. And they have this thought, Jo hue mujhe shakti aisi, sabi jeev karu shasan rasi. If I have the strength, I want to do that helps all life forever. Ultimate happiness. And this is what we think about and we reflect on when we say the Saat Laakh Sutra. Developing this compassion is key to spirituality of all faiths and all sorts. And certainly in the Jain spirituality, we contemplate on the contents of the Saat Laakh Sutra and garner our compassion for all life. In the interests of this, and as a part 2, I have taken the rest of the components of the Saat Laakh Sutra in a more superficial manner. So, completing the one-sensed beings, the Vanaspatikai, or plant life, can be divided into that where one body has one life, and that includes flowers, fruits, trees, and different parts of that life can be clearly distinguished. If it's cut, it doesn't grow again of its own accord. There's another type of plant life called Gunmore and other similar families where one body contains infinite souls. And this has the characteristic as well that if it's cut in a certain place, it grows again. It includes aloe vera, potatoes, and all the Gunmore classes like onions, carrots, beetroots. And this gives an answer as to why Jains don't eat potatoes, onions, garlic, and certainly during Paryushan, but even in the rest of their lives, they avoid these because these contain infinite souls in one body. So to lessen or minimize the amount of violence caused, these are avoided. And there have been experiments done to prove this, and me sharing this is not in a in a preaching or dominant way or anything like that, but just to understand the reasoning behind various things, as the core of the spirituality is non-violence. So the more one can do, the better. And I hope understanding this helps people understand the reasoning behind some things a bit more with science. Moving on from all the one-sensed beings, we move to two-sensed beings within the Saat Laakh Sutra and within Jeevichar. Two-sensed beings includes things like dvidal, where certain foods are mixed, and like grains and certain other dairy products, for example. And with dairy products, in the modern sense, in the modern methods, there's another argument where we take the vegan aspect, where the process of making this today is such that it causes harm to animals. But apart from that, when certain grains are mixed with dairy, so creates conditions for the generation of two-sensed lives. So certain things are not mixed in that way from that argument. And continuing on from that, stale food, what we call vasi food, is also a breeding ground for two-sensed living beings, Beindia. Similarly, certain foods like bread, fast food, tinned food are also things which harbor these, and hence fresh food is preferred for that reason. And in the Saat Laakh Sutra, for any 2 sense living beings we've harmed by mind, speech, or action, we ask forgiveness, Michhami Duktam. From here, we move to Deindiya, or 3 sensed life. This includes ants and other creatures of a similar ilk, which can be explored in detail through this link below that can share. On this video, there's a link to a full detailed Jeevichar video. Sometimes we may trap little insects in different ways. In this picture here, we see an ant trapped on all sides. That's a 3 sensed life. The bee, a 4 sensed life. Anybody who eats honey or those productions, there's a lot of violence involved in producing that. Even if we don't eat meat and we don't harm animals in those other ways, there's still many other ways could harm them. For example, my profession is as a doctor, and although I don't do any experiments on animals myself to harm them, a lot of the drugs we use, a lot of the medicines we use, how do they come to us? A lot of them, there have been things involved in the past with animal experiments. So when we're saying Pratikraman, we acknowledge that in some way, in some form, we have been involved in this violence as well. If we've gone to the zoo, we've gone to the circus, you can see these pictures here where this dolphin is being forced to jump through a hoop. So there's many ways where we can harm these creatures. So these are talking about 5 sensed animals where it may not straight away occur to us. This parrot in a cage, again, any place we've been to that supports or profits from this, in a way we're partaking in this. In this Saat Laakh Sutra, we acknowledge that, ask for forgiveness, and try to improve and not be part of these things. We move on to talking about Devta, Narki, so angels. Now we may think, how do you get involved with that? But there may be ways, and certainly if not by action, by mind or by speech. And all of these 8.4 million species, we think in a way of compassion. We may think, what's sad to be in a Dev's life, in an angel's life, but even in their lives, there's status, higher, lower, and one thing that burns them a lot is jealousy of various types, and we can do this in a lot more depth in the future, but you can see just from some of these pictures some of the different pains they go to. Narki, or hellish beings, 4 lakh Narki, their lives are full of pain, and we feel compassion for all life when we say this, just as a Tirthankara feels compassion, Jo hoye mujhe shakti aisi, sabhi jeev karo shasan rasi, for all life. For humans, from the 14 lakh Manusha, or 1.4 million different types of birthplace or species of humans, what compassion can we think, feel for them? So humans, as you see in this slide here, are always Krodh, man, maya, lobo, anger, greed, ego, deceit. There are many inner torments, icha, desire, that torment us and keep us away from happiness. Because what is happiness? Happiness is the fulfillment of desire, but more and more desires keep arising, so that state of happiness never comes. And these inner enemies, as this diagram shows, keep harming us, whether it's from a tiny age as a baby, as you see here, the pains of that, the pains of old age, jara, we see an older person, rich and poor, we see this distinction here and how different people have different things. So compassion for all humans, whether that's rich or poor, people will have torments on the inside of material things or within. So for all of these lives, we evoke and we feel compassion. So just to finish, we'll share the Saat Laakh Sutra once more. If in saying any of this, I've said anything wrong, said anything against Jainism, and misrepresented anything, Michhami Duktam. This is just my own humble effort, and please forgive any mistakes. Thank you. Saat Laakh Prithvikai, Saat Laakh Apkai, Saat Laakh Devkai, Saat Laakh Vaukai, 10 लाख प्रत्येक वनस्पतिकाय, 14 लाख साधारण वनस्पतिकाय, 2 लाख बेन्द्रिय, 2 लाख तेन्द्रिय, 2 लाख चौरिंद्रिय, 4 लाख देवता, 4 लाख नारकी 4 लाख 53 पंचेन्द्रिय 14 लाख मनुष्य एवं कार्य 84 लाख जीव योनि माही मारे जीवे जे कोई जीव हण्यो होय हनाव्यो होय हणता प्रत्ये अनुमोद्यो होय ते सभी हो मनोचिंकाया करी तस्मिच्छामि दुग्धम। नमो अरिहन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयरिआणं नमो उवज्जायाणं नमो लोये सवसाहुणम् एषो पञ्चनमुकारो सवपावपणासनो मङ्गलाणञ्च सवेसिं पधमं हवै मङ्गलम्।